Okay, let's begin. So, starting with today, we're looking at answering techniques on inference questions. I think previously we covered this as well, and then I showed you guys a really interesting website for answering inference questions on. Today, we're going to cover a little bit more on that, and that's going to form the main part of today's lesson, basically. Okay, but before that, we are going to cover some other things, including a comprehension cloze right now, and then some synthesis and transformation later. And for comprehension open-ended, before we do this portion, we'll be looking at some answering techniques for inferential questions. So keeping in mind that inferences are actually smart guesses that you make because it either is very possible that it happens or it's realistic, basically. Okay, now let's have a look. Comprehension. Now, comprehension is actually a section that's really tough for a lot of pupils because they lack vocabulary. So it's either that or they don't know how to look for clues within the passage itself. So actually, the first step when you deal with comprehension cloze, right, is not to immediately fill in the words. The first step is actually to read the whole thing carefully first, and then ask yourself, what is the passage telling you? Ask yourself, what is it all about, right? And then if after you've read the passage, it sounds a bit familiar, you're like, oh, you know what? I do know some vocabulary about the closed passage. So that will definitely help you in filling in the blanks as well. Ooh, very good. Good job, Jerusha. That is a very high score. So you are just like 0.5 away from a perfect mark. Excellent. Good job, good job. So let's look at the passage first. Let's read through, and then let's think about some potential words we can use. Now, I do know that some of you here have already done this online, and then the online thing tells you that you got it wrong, but you might have gotten it correct actually. So if you want to check whether your answer is correct or not, just let me know what you put in for the question, and I'll tell you whether it's an acceptable answer. Because the teacher who gave the model answers probably didn't give all the potential model answers available because there's just so many words that can be replaced and placed inside the question, and it's a good answer as well. Okay, so keep that in mind as we go through this. So, how did the early humans determine which food was edible? How did they decide which food was blank? We need to go blank in time, thousands of years, to understand how food evolved. Early humans lived as hunters and gatherers. They shifted daily from one place to another, hunting animals and blank plants for food. They were always blank search of food, and this practice left them with blank time for other pursuits. Finding food blank a time-consuming and energy-draining task, not to blank dangerous. If they were not injured by animals, blank a hunt, there was always the blank of starvation when food was scarce. Over the years, gatherers used trial and blank to know which plants were edible. They blanked which plants the animals were consuming and followed suit. So very smart, right? The early people, they actually saw what the animals were eating and they tried eating what the animals were eating as well, and tried and saw what kind of effects it had on their body. And then if it was good, they continued eating it, basically. Should one person blank sick after eating a plant, they quickly learned not to eat that plant ever again. Over the passage of time, they also discovered that many poisonous plants could cause the tongue to sting, serving as a warning sign not to blank it, but to spit it out. Oh, that's very good, Yushan. That is a fantastic score. Are you happy with your score? Nice. Okay. That is almost a pretty high score. If you can score like that for PSLE, right, you're good to go. Maintain, or maybe do a bit better. Yeah, good. Okay, but to spit it out. Many of these hunters and gatherers subsequently became farmers after learning how to raise livestock and cultivate crops. They no longer needed to move blank searching for food. With more time on blank hands, they began exploring ways to make their food taste better. It was then that cooking was invented and different cultures developed their own unique ways to prepare food. Okay, so after reading this passage, I realized that it's basically about food, right? And how humans actually found out what was edible and what was inedible, and how cooking actually started, and why cooking was able to start, right? Simply because people started farming and then they could grow their own food. If not, people would still be searching for food actively now in the wild, right? So I know that that's the main topic. And then now I can start thinking about what words I can use, what vocabulary I can use with regards to food or searching for food or finding out what's poisonous and what's not. And then I can start putting in words for my questions here. So like the first one, right? How did the early humans determine which food was edible? How did they decide which food was? So over here, you definitely have a clue in edible, right? Because you knew that, how early humans determined what food was edible. How did they decide which food was? You probably need the opposite meaning over here for this blank. So the opposite of edible could be inedible, or potentially, which food was dangerous, or potentially as well, which food was poisonous, right? All these would be um, acceptable answers for your first question over here. And yes, Jianing actually used poisonous for question 1. So that's a legit answer. Okay. We need to go what in time? So over here, you're going thousands of years, and then you realize that over here in the next paragraph, right? They're talking about early humans. So it's definitely a long time ago, isn't it? And this actually gives us the clue to what words we can use for question 2, right? We need to go what in time? And unfortunately for this one, there's only one answer. We need to go back in time. If you put anything else over here, I highly doubt that you would get it correct, right? If you're going back in time, you're traveling back to the past to realize how humans changed and evolved their eating habits. So they shifted daily from one place to another, hunting animals and what plants for food. So hunting would be for animals. What would be the word for plants over here? And you know what? You can't say planting plants because over here, they haven't started farming yet, right? Only when they started farming did they start planting plants, right? But you can't say planting plants here yet because I have read the entire passage. I know that later on in the passage is when they talk about, all right, humans becoming farmers later on. So therefore, I know that for my question 3 here, I can't be using words like planting plants or growing plants. That would be wrong because they haven't started that yet. This passage, this paragraph here is talking about when humans were very early in their way how they gathered food. So here we can say hunting animals, and maybe we can say gathering plants, or we can say collecting plants because they were not planting them yet. Okay, these two would be good answers. Let's see what other people actually wrote. Jianing says eating plants, hunting animals, eating plants. Yep, I will accept eating plants because they do actually put it in their mouths. All right, so if we have eating, then we definitely have the word consuming as well because consuming is the same as eating. So eating plants, consuming plants, all these are acceptable answers. Just don't give me things like, planting or growing or farming plants, that kind of thing doesn't work. Okay, so that's question 3. Any other, so far for questions 1, 2, and 3, are there any other words that you want to check with me just to make sure that, whether you got the correct answer or not? If you do, just let me know in the chat group and then I can let you know why it's right or why it's wrong. None so far. Okay, let's move on to question 4. They were always what search of food, and this practice left them with what time? So they were always, there's only one answer over here, unfortunately, right? We always say they were always in search of food, right? They were in search of food. Okay, and this practice left them with little time, or we can use the word scant time. Scant means little. or you can use the word limited as well. Little time, scant time, limited time for other pursuits. All right. Finding food, what a time-consuming and energy-draining task. So this was in the past, right? We're looking at early humans who lived as hunter-gatherers. So over here, we have to use the past tense verb was. Finding food was a time-consuming and energy-draining task. That was the past. Now, it no longer is. Okay? So you can't use present tense like what Jianing put. Jianing put is over here, right? So that's wrong. Okay, finding food was a time-consuming and energy-draining task. Not to what? It's an English expression over here. Not to mention, right? Not to mention meaning I want to say something else as well, right? So not to mention dangerous too. All right, so that's the English phrase you have to use here. Not to mention dangerous. And then after that, the author continues to elaborate on why it's dangerous. If they were not injured by animals, so you might be injured by animals on a hunt. If you were not injured by animals on a hunt, there was always the danger of starvation, or you can say there was always the risk of starvation. If you don't want it to be a negative possibility, you can just put the word possibility by itself. I will accept this as an answer as well. There was always the possibility of starvation when food was scarce. Scarce meaning rare, right? It's really tough to find.
Mr. Joel,
Yes.
for question 8, can I put like if they were not injured by the animals during a hunt?
If they were not injured by animals, yes, I will accept during a hunt. That works as well. Good addition, Tristan. That definitely works. Nice one. So if they were not injured by animals during a hunt, good. Okay, so now we have covered question 1 to question 9. Any words that you want to try out within these questions that you think might be potential answers? If they were not injured by animals, from a hunt. Yes, we can use from as well, Kaihan. That's a good spot. You could be injured by animals from a hunt. So you coming back from a hunt, right? But during the hunt, you got injured by an animal. Yes, that's possible. That's a potential answer too. Good. Any other answers you might want to try over here? So rest assured that during your PSLE, right, the examiners would actually consider your answers carefully without just saying that, oh, it's not a model answer, it's definitely wrong. Yeah. But that could be what your teachers in school are doing because they don't have the time to brainstorm so many words and still, actually mark everyone. They have like 120 students each at least, of papers to mark. So they might not have time to consider each and every word you put in. But when your teacher is running through your exams, you can always ask them and say, oh, okay, Mrs. Tan or Mr. Tay or whatever, I put this word over here. Does that word work? Can you explain why it works or why it doesn't work? Right? And then you can always ask for more marks because if it works, why not? You should get the mark, right? So that's question 1 to 9. Okay? So whatever marks you get back during an exam, don't always think that that mark is not going to change. It can change as long as you know what you're talking about, right? And you're very sure that your answer might be correct. Even if at the end your answer is still wrong, after your teacher explains it, right? At least you learn why it's wrong. It's better than learning nothing, right? And just listening to your teacher giving you answers for what? You don't learn anything, right? So ask, right? Asking is really important. So over the years, gatherers use trial and, so over here we have an English phrase, it's called trial and error. Okay? Trial and error means you try something out. If it works, good for you. If it doesn't work right, then too bad, you're just unlucky. So that's called trial and error. You keep trying different possibilities. And if you continue trying, there's bound to be some that are edible, bound to be some that are delicious, bound to be some animal that tastes really good or whatever. So it's trial and error to know which plants were edible. They what which plants the animals were consuming. So you can say